Good day, everyone. Thank you for taking time off and joining our webinar today on Defense in Depth, Endpoint Security Strategies to Bolster Cyber Resilience. I'm Karthika, and I'm part of the Unified Endpoint Management and Security team here at ManageEngine. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's session. So in today's session, our speakers will be talking about or discussing on the evolving threat landscape, on where exactly endpoint security features in, why organizations should adopt a multi-level strategy when it comes to security, and how they can go about implementing the same. We're thrilled to have two experts to discuss on these topics. So let me quickly introduce them. So firstly, we have Paddy Harrington, who's a senior analyst at Forrester. Paddy needs no introduction. He is a very popular name and a trusted voice when it comes to cybersecurity, especially IoT and endpoint security. So his research and guidance have helped a lot of organizations tackle and deal with their IT challenges and requirements. So welcome, Paddy. It's great to have you here with us today. Joining him, we have Romanus Prabhu Raymond, who's the Director of Product Support and our Security Evangelist here at ManageEngine. So Romanus is a seasoned expert when it comes to endpoint management and security. He has a separate fan base here at ManageEngine within our customers. So he has so much hands-on experience with respect to implementing our solutions across organizations of various sizes, shapes, and types. So whenever we have anything practical, we run to Romanus for answers to all of those questions. So it's great to have you here with us today, Romanus. I just have a couple of housekeeping items to check off before we begin. So this webinar is being recorded and the recording will be shared with you all after the event. Questions are more than welcome. So please go ahead and put all of your questions down in the Q&A section. We'll be addressing them during the live Q&A session at the end of the presentation. We also have an expert panel with us who will be answering your questions via chat as well. So with that out of the way, I'll hand it over to Paddy and Romanus to kick the session forward. Over to you guys.
Thank you, Karthika. Thank you for the beautiful introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm really super excited about this webinar, right? And especially thanks, Paddy. Thanks for joining me. And we will be discussing security strategies, right? So today, in today's context, in the cybersecurity, the threats are sophisticated. Now, what are we have? So you have to be enabled with latest information and the latest strategies and tools to protect your business, right? So we would be diving deep into such discussions, strategies, and our guest speaker, Paddy, would be able to give us insights across the globe from the data, the enriching data, what they have for this. So without further delay, Paddy, I would like to start the discussion from observation. Probably sometime back, 2017, we had this WannaCry, right? So almost 200,000 endpoints were down due to this, and we understand this is because of a patch which was missing, and even the internet-facing Windows machines were not patched, and because of that, we saw a whole lot of systems were down, and depending on the industry, the impact was very painful, right? Now, that's a ransomware attack, probably 5 years back. And even today, we have ransomware attack. The delivery method, the attack methodology, right? The way they extract money. Now, those days it was only encryption. Today we talk about double extortion, triple extortion, right? All those stuff. And in spite of all these things, the defense mechanisms what the organizations take, still the ransomware attacks are happening. Even there are incidents where the same WannaCry is repeating on organizations. Now where do we go wrong? I mean, we understand from the general informations and where do they fail in terms of specific incidents when they have a report about that. But in general, So where do we go wrong? Where do organizations have to focus more? What are they lacking in terms of, so that the defense mechanism is not strong enough to ward off such ransomware attacks? Over to you.
Great question. I think the problem is the traditional approaches that enterprises took to security. I just say, next gen antivirus type things. They're not enough anymore. And a main reason for this is we're not just dealing with what everyone knew as malware. WannaCry is a file, but the delivery of that is through multiple stages, and it's through various attack methods that are fileless in many cases. So the looking for known bad, it doesn't cut it anymore. On top of that, the perimeter that businesses used to deal with has collapsed. We no longer have people working in one office. Now, I did sales as part of my career, as well as consulting, so I was constantly on the road. That's always been part of business, but since 2020, when everyone was forced to work from home, the idea of working anywhere has solidified within many businesses, if not most. And because of that, those traditional methods we used to have to protect the endpoints have gone away, and now we've left with this really, as the term is, kludgy collection of tools to try and make it work, and it really doesn't. We then also have, part with this anywhere work, of a variety of endpoints we're dealing with. It's no longer just a desktop system or a laptop. The attacks against mobile have increased. You have IoT devices, you have OT devices, you have SaaS apps, you have locally installed apps. And the thing about all of this is the attackers know this, and they target that breadth of surface now. So it's no longer just, I'm going to deliver a file through a PDF or doc or Excel. I'm going to use all of these different methods I have on that exposed surface to find a way to deliver my, in this case, ransomware, which is taking over really, to make money off of this customer, as that's how they view it. It's their customer. So that's why those old-fashioned methods, they do not cut it anymore, and we need to take a more balanced approach to security.
Okay, got it. That's quite insightful. So what is this about?
Yeah, and this is some data from Forrester's security survey from 2023. Obviously, we talked to security decision makers, and this was asking about how many times in the last year have you been potentially compromised or breached. And obviously, that first one is really nice, right? 23% said they haven't. It's nice for them, but for everyone else, you can see there's at least one to that last number there. 25 times over the past 12 months that they have been compromised, right? So twice a month for, let's see, it's 2%, so roughly, 20 businesses getting breached every 2 months. Okay. It's really scary, especially that middle of that 3 to 5, a quarter of respondents 3 to 5 times. And this is a problem is, we have all of these different endpoints and surfaces and such, and attackers find their way in. That's what I talked about, is they find their way through because you're doing an old-fashioned or traditional approach to securing the endpoint, and it just doesn't work.
Okay, got it. But this data is really shocking. See, so organizations getting robbed twice a month. I'm sorry to say this, it doesn't make sense. So once you are attacked, so you are going to come back with some mechanism. You are going to find what is the root cause for that, and you are trying to ensure that you are having proper security controls over that, and this will ensure that that the attack is not happening or in future, or at least the same kind of attack. Now, I don't understand how is this happening? How the same organization is being attacked multiple times?
A lot of times when you research the incident, whatever it is, you've been compromised. So you look for the point of compromise, right? The problem, and we talked about this previously, is those points of compromise are now extremely broad. We no longer have that single attack surface of an endpoint or a server anymore. The place where the user is spending so much time, the browser, has become an attack surface. I was just reading today of exploited Chrome zero-day vulnerabilities. So this is a point of attack. As I said previously, those mobile devices that everyone has, and whether it's our pocket or our bag as we're walking around, the OS is not secure by default. Yes, it's a different structure where the core of the OS is a little more secure than desktop, but it doesn't mean that entire device is, doesn't mean that the apps are. And where's your data going? I don't know. Do you know? So you can't treat this like a security device. I say, how old is that office printer? But that really goes to these IoT devices that have proliferated inside of businesses. We've written a lot about this, that, from it's that ancient printer that you haven't been able to patch in 6 years because, well, one, it still works, so you don't want to take it offline, but the manufacturer stopped supporting updates for it. So you don't know how vulnerable it is to attack. And then the real scary one is all these devices within your architecture. You can't even say enterprise anymore. You can just say architecture, on-prem, remote, cloud, that you just don't know are there. I've known of breaches that have happened in organizations because they didn't know about certain devices. Well, if you don't know it's there, you don't know how to protect it and defend against the attacks. So this is all over the place, and if we think of the user side, and we go back to that browser, users are spending so much time there. So many apps are delivered in a SaaS model nowadays. So why not try attacking through that?
Okay.
Yeah, and that leads into this data piece on our workforce survey. If you look at this, right, you take the numbers of all my work and majority, this is 83% of users who say that they do the majority or all of their work in the browser. So that's what you are. You're focused inside of this. And if your idea of defending the browser is, well, we've got a firewall, we use a proxy so that they can't go to malicious sites. Well, that's only known malicious. You don't know about, as I said, what you don't know. So if you're not broadening your defense in that browser, the attacks are going to get through. And that's just one avenue. Never mind, like I said, those mobile and IoT and the unknowns.
Wow. It's very interesting that you showed this browser data. I'm very happy that our engineering team and the product management team has actually found this browser as an endpoint very long back, right? So I should probably say we are the very few who have introduced browser security as a product, along with even before it was there hot in the market. And if you look at the growth, right? Initially it was called systems management, then the analysts came, you started calling it as client management tools, and then it moved to unified endpoint management. In between, there was mobile device management, and then enterprise mobility management. Now, so we kind of thought, along with this, we should also have some solution protection for the browsers, along with mobile devices. So I'm proud to say that by 2018, we already had a browser security plugin, which was added to our offering, right? And later we have added other security modules, and then called it as UEMS, Unified Endpoint Management and Security. And then according to the analyst, how they define the product in terms of endpoint protection and endpoint detect and response, that's how it moves. But I am very happy that we were able to understand this at the beginning and have mobile device management along with our traditional way of management earlier, and similarly have a browser management included in that. And not only with respect to endpoint management, if you look at Manage Engine, Zoho Manage Engine itself, if you look at our evolution of products for the last 2 decades, last 10 years, last decade itself, we have started focusing more on the security side of the product. Now, if you look at the enterprise assets, right? Endpoints are your assets, the identity which use the endpoint, and the data which is generated through the application and the infrastructure, all these. And we have products aligned towards such assets and their security. So that's where I'm so excited when you started talking about browser and mobile device management. Yes, we kind of started doing that long back. We understood that that's where we really have the gap in terms of where we have to focus more in terms of security, right? And talking about the mobile device, there are more bring your own device kind of things, and that gives more security gaps. That's what I think. So what do you have to say about that from your point of view?
Yeah, if we look back at those attacks and breaches that happened, so the compromises from those respondents, we look at, from external anyways, what was the target of that attack. Now, top of this list, and unfortunately it's been the same for many years, it's part of my coverage as well, of IoT. IoT devices have been the #1 response here for quite a while. Another topic for another time. However, if you look down right below the corporate-owned computer, at roughly the same percentage, if we think about this, because there's a little error factor, the employee-owned mobile and the employee-owned computer are really up there as targeted endpoints of attack. And this should go to that point that you have of managing and securing these devices better, because really, this is where we are day to day. We sit inside of our PC or our mobile device, and sure, the corporate-owned computer, no doubt it's going to be a target. But from the end user, when I'm bringing my own device, how well is it controlled, by the company? How well is it secured? Oftentimes, those relied on what the end user provides. Is that enough? Have we checked it? Unfortunately, I think for many of these enterprises, they haven't checked to see what that security level is. They haven't put enough protection around those endpoints to reduce the attack surface. So, this is part of that problem of why that old-fashioned method of, if you have basic AV, it's all good. It's not anymore. Now, how it's carried out, that's a little different. Prime answer, sure, it's a known exploit. And this could be an exploit in the OS, applications, it could be anywhere along the way. But the second one there, that software supply chain, this is where things get dangerous, because this could be your SaaS applications, right? So somewhere in that chain of the SaaS app, there was a compromise. It could be third party coming in with their devices. That could be a supply chain. Or these applications that are local, whether it's on a desktop or on mobile, where they're using SDKs or APIs through a third party. And that's where the compromise is. We think of Log4j. That was a supply chain breach. And think of how ubiquitous that was and how broad scale that attack was, because those components were used in so many platforms. There's still endpoints out there and systems that have that compromise inside them. It's known. So it can still be attacked. And this is part of this problem of, because everything can be interconnected and we're using this old-fashioned defense mechanisms, the attacks are no longer monolithic. Right? They're not coming through one point, they're coming through a wide variety. We have to think about that and defend against it.
Well, great. So understanding about a lot of such attacks. So considering the endpoints and endpoints with more the browsers, the applications, right? And they have to be patched, and the vulnerabilities what they have. So the popular defense strategy that I would recommend my customers in terms of big enterprises is something like this. So it is drafted vulnerabilities against remediation, right? So we categorize this vulnerability based on how we identify that. The first is about known vulnerabilities. We all understand the vendor, the customer, the threat actor. All these parties know about there is a vulnerability and there is a fix for it. And this is where the WannaCry, where we miserably failed because nobody cared to apply that. The threat actors made use of that. Now, this is your first line of defense, I would say, to my customers. So when you're able to patch all your OS applications, third-party applications, wherever the endpoints are, it could be within the office premises, remote offices, roaming, anywhere you should be able to ensure that you have addressed this known vulnerability patching, right? And along with that, you can also do a vulnerability management, identify what are the vulnerable stuff, what is not required in terms of old protocols, the ports, what you have, things like that. And if you are able to arrest them, well and good, you are actually having first line of defense, right? Most of the known vulnerabilities are stopped in here. And so the second and third, the blind spots, which I have mentioned here. So we would be actually considering that as a blind spot. You have a lot of security controls, but unless you understand what is happening inside that, you have rightly mentioned that browsers, right? Inside the browsers, you have a lot of applications running. What are those applications? Will your patching be sufficient enough to protect these browsers? No. The patching is for the applications, but still there are applications, there are some piece of code which is running inside the browser. How are you going to protect that? Unless you see what is there inside, you will not be able to. So that's something that has to be focused. And you have data leak problems. So before addressing data leak, what you should understand, what are your sensitive data, essential data, which shouldn't be leaking. So have you defined that? Is it being stopped at every point in terms of hardware, USB, copying it, sending it a mail, right? All those kind of stuff. And similarly, applications. Do you have an allowed list and a list which are not allowed in your organization, right? Those kind of, so this will stop the unwanted malware being entering into your organization. And then finally, encryptions, right? When the endpoint sends data to the cloud or cloud to the endpoint, to the server, are you able to encrypt so that any man in the middle kind of attack is not going to leak your business data? Now, considering all this stuff, these are the blind spots. So having a better visibility gives you a better spotlights, gives you a better visibility so that you should be able to have better controls over that. This is your second line of defense, unknown vulnerability. The first is about known, second is unknown. The third one is, we all know about this unknown region. We don't know what is the kind of attack, what is the tactics or techniques the threat actor is going to use. So the only option given with that for us is to detect, wait, monitor, detect, and respond to that. So that's where you have your endpoint detection and response comes in. Now we suggest that so that we layer this defense mechanism, we have a broader spectrum so that there is less noise in the detect and respond, so that everything is captured at different levels. That's our approach. That's a suggestion that I would do to my enterprise customers. So I want your opinion. What do you think about this layering?
This is a great way to approach it, because none of these by themselves is going to cover it. It's the fact that you have the different layering between them, and I think that's going to be the real benefit to this. You know, and I think this kind of goes into that part. But if you look at that lower right corner that you had of detect and response as part of it, you know, if we only relied on that, we removed everything else, so those other three quadrants you had, we'd be missing so much, because that gap between that mean time to detect and mean time to resolution, honestly, in many environments, that can really be a chasm. We're talking Grand Canyon like, because you're talking detection within a couple minutes, but the resolution in many enterprises counts into days when you think about it. So this is a real problem when you try and approach security with just that of DR, right? Whether EDR, NDR, ITDR, whatever. The other side of that you get into is this constant alerting, and we always call alert fatigue, and this constant pop-up sitting on your screen of alert, 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 and you as an analyst having to respond to that. Now, maybe the system has some automated responses, but unless you have a really mature environment that has been in place for 10 years, those responses are going to be done by you as an analyst, because you don't have this massive automation string. Now, when we look at those other pieces that you had there, right, and we think about this detect and respond, the better way to do this is start prevention. Because if the attacker is never there, you don't have to detect and respond to any threat. It's been stopped.
Right.
It should be stopped at multiple levels, right? And that goes to that last point. That's why you had those 4. It's not just one piece. And that's the thing about those 4 is there was such a breakdown to so many different components of each of that. I think, just rough numbers off the top of my head, I think there were like 10 different pieces to that structure you laid out. So if you only relied on detect and response, you've taken out 9 other defense mechanisms, and that's not good. Now, can it be costly? Sure, I understand that. But at the same time, what is your business risk? What can you accept?
Right.
So I think we have to really look at that. I don't want to risk someone being inside.
Yeah.
When we look at the hard numbers of this, so from our security survey in 2023, we look at how much time organizations spend on the different parts of any incident. Investigation is that deepest one, right? So the detection can come up fast, but that's why the resolution can take days, because you have to really investigate what was the root cause of this. And then once you figure that out, sure, containment and recovery and all those fun pieces, but that first one is where analysts spend their most time. And if you can reduce that by having less threats and there's less things that they have to investigate, they're not going to get as burnt out, and they're not going to say, I don't need this job anymore. I can go outside and, I can plant vegetables for a living. That's a lot easier than sitting in front of, some EDR or XDR and trying to troubleshoot and investigate these incidents all the time.
Great. So we've just seen the challenges that the detect and respond mechanism has. So we've quickly launched a poll. We want to hear what our audience have to say about this. So go down there and drop down your responses for the poll. Based on your organization's current security strategies, which area do you feel requires more focus or implementation, or which do you feel is very challenging? So please go ahead and select one of the answers from the options that is being given to you. I think a lot of you are already putting down your answers. So we've already got a very decent amount of responses. So let's just wait for a few seconds more so that, we can conclusively find out what you guys think is more challenging when it comes to your organization's security strategy. I think most of you have finished your polls, put down your responses. So let's quickly share the results now.
That's interesting. More on advanced threat detection. Oh, more on employee training and awareness. And followed by threat detection response and then attack surface.
So what do you think about this, Paddy?
I'm not entirely surprised. Yeah, it's funny. I've been at Forrester now about 2.5 years, and my first year I did a presentation at our security forum, and I talked about that need for employee training and awareness, because I remember being in other businesses where the security training and the awareness was, read this PowerPoint, look at this PDF, go through this short little click here course, and it didn't teach you anything. So, I think this feeds into some other data that we really have out there that users really need to be trained better. We'll talk about that a little later, but that's not surprising. The same thing, that advanced threat detection and response, getting the basics is, I don't want to say easy, but it's more about, as we talked about before, it's not just the endpoint, it's not just your desktop or your laptop. It's about all these other things in your environment. So that advanced threat detection. Yeah,
rightly said. Yes, it's not only the employees, but it's also the other components, right? So, even if you look at the IT in typical organizations, right? So you would have, they work on the regular IT operations where they ensure that the business runs, right? And all the required things for the business in terms of IT is delivered, and they keep the mission running. On the other hand, the security team is there. Now, it's very common that we see that in a typical scenario, when an incident happens, the security team would collect all the information and comes up with problems where the operations team have missed something, and they should have done that, or they should have already known about that and informed them. And this is a scenario that I have seen with many of our customer environments. Now, one of the things that we have done in terms of understanding this problem is, though you have an endpoint management solution in place, right? So you have a solution. Now you define what a security posture for your organization, right? In terms of patching, in terms of hardening the hardware, in terms of application restrictions, all of that. And the endpoints are in the same level of security posture what you define for your organization. Imagine there are few endpoints which are not reporting to the server. The employees are on the go, they are on the road, they are not able to reach the server. If that is the scenario, the security posture what you have defined for your organization is not actually picked up by this endpoints. Now, at some point of time, these endpoints would come back to the production network or the office network. Now, what are the measures that you take so you are able to proactively examine that and let them in? In most of our customers' environment, they let the endpoint just join the production. That's where, whenever, I'm not saying it's going to be always a problem, but whenever there is an incident because of that, that's where the security teams and the operations team start to pointing fingers at each other. Now, that's where our product team had done the network access control, which means the endpoint itself, not at the network layer, at the agent side itself, before it joins the network, the server will examine the security posture of this endpoint. If it is not in par with what is defined for the organization, it's going to quarantine itself, not attaching itself to any resources in the organization, but quarantine, only connect to the server, ensure that it is bringing it the same level of defined security posture. And once it is done, it is able to then allow it into the production network. This way, we kind of understood at the endpoint level where the maximum incident could happen because of the improper level of security posture. We were able to fill that gap with this kind of the feature that we have: staging, quarantining, and then allowing that inside. So that's something that we thought that's something that every organization should have a strategy, and the tools aligns for that. What's your opinion on that, Paddy?
I think that's a great idea. One of the things we talk about here a lot at Forrester is that idea of zero trust, right? And part of that goes to ensuring the device that's coming in, not just the user, but the device can be trusted. So doing those posture checks can really be helpful. And I think that really moves to this idea of a proactive model, what we used to call positive security. You know, zero trust is the approach now, but it's all the same, really. That idea that IT management and security management, as you had in the last slide, working together, and the systems are integrated so that there's a smoother flow and transition between those teams. So when an incident happens on the security side, actions can be passed over to IT that can make those changes as fast as possible. And the same that when IT makes changes to the environment, the security operations team is notified that this change has been put through, and their systems can be triggered to analyze what is the security impact of this change. These endpoints have, you know, a new application deployed on that. How is that going to impact security for those endpoints? So this is some great stuff when those teams move into this proactive model of working together. To that point, right, of the employee awareness and training, the users really do have to become part of this. And the more that users understand how to work safer, the less work everyone else has to do. And I don't want to be seeming like I'm bashing end users. I'm one myself, right? I don't manage Forrester's environment, but to be more aware means, you know, I'm not only helping the business be safe, but I'm helping myself be safe. Because those same things of being aware of phishing emails and malicious websites and not just opening any file that you get, translate into my personal life. So I can be more aware of what I'm doing in my own email and my own web browsing. When we think of, you know, I think to your four-quadrant layout, right? It's no longer just detect and respond, as we've gotten into as this mantra really, as of late. It's, yes, you're detecting a problem. but it's protect. If you don't protect, you respond, you restore the environment back to running, you resolve not only just the single incident, but the whole root cause of the incident, every chain.
Yeah.
And then you go back to the beginning because it's going to happen again. And then one of the last things I do try and talk about to people, and I've said this for many years, 5 Ps. Proper planning prevents poor performance. If you're winging it, whether it's IT or security operations, if you're kind of doing it on the fly, you're gonna have failures. And sometimes, hopefully they'll be small, but I think sometimes those failures get really big. And when that happens, you get things like WannaCry, because you didn't properly plan for this new type of attack. Yeah. Talking from the security leaders side, right, the decision makers in our 2023 security survey, this is a bit of an eye chart, and I understand, so I'm not going to read everything. But the leaders told us all of their different challenges that they were looking at, and if you read through, you can see a lot of things here that kind of tie together. A complexity, it's a theme, the lack of visibility, the day-to-day activities and lack of staff and lack of budget, lack of skills for employees in these big security employees. So a lot of these all fit together, and I'm sure the people watching, whether live or recorded, you'll feel all of these inside you. You'll see that all and go, yep, that's me, that's me, that's me. So, this isn't just one piece. And I think that goes to a lot what we've talked about today. It's not just one component to do security better. There are so many different challenges. And for the leaders out there, they see the same. Now, talking to the point of the user training, right, we did another survey. This is for the digital workplace and employee technology. This is from this year's numbers, right? So we were able to get this recently. And this is the feedback from the users themselves of where their thoughts are. The ones that are interesting, I think, is if you look down to numbers 4 and 5, I would see training on how to stay secure at work or when working outside the office. Now, it's nice that if we average those two, roughly 40% say they have good training for working inside and out, but that means 60% of the users don't get good training of how to stay safe. I think the big thing about any of these answers, because people could choose multiple in this survey, is none of them is over half. So the use themselves, that first bullet, I believe my organization has good cybersecurity policies and technology, under half agree with that. So from the end user's perspective, they don't feel things are secure. And that feeds back into changing their mindset and helping them understand what's in place instead of wagging your finger at them saying, you did this wrong. No, show them how things are improved and then listen to them on, hey, we need to learn how to work better and be more secure. We'll give you that. We just have to, get the right training in place.
No, interesting. And we see this and hear this from our customers in terms of the multiple sources, components laid different ways so that we should be able to stop. See, we were talking about the Johari window, where the layered approach in terms of having a broader spectrum to have different problems stopped at different levels. Now, this is something very interesting that we also suggest our enterprise customers in terms of NIST framework, right? So when you talk about having proactive model, this is a proactive model which NIST suggests. So the cyber security risk framework talks about identify all your assets, protect all your assets based on the vulnerability, because we understand any asset is going to develop vulnerabilities over the period of time according to the usage, according to the modernization, upgrades, things like that. So it will develop vulnerability. So your responsibility is identify what are your assets and how are you going to protect that. And then in spite of that, there's going to be attack incidents, how soon you are able to detect that and how soon you are able to respond to that. And finally, the attacks are going to happen by any means, by any chance. And what is your strategy in terms of staying resilient? Though attack is there, you are able to do your business as usual. you are able to come out of that, neutralize that, and ensure you get the data back from your backup or the mechanisms what you have, and continue your business as usual, right? That's about the NIST framework, which I translate into according to customers' knowledge and ease of understanding. On the other hand, you see the common assets categories which enterprises manage. Endpoints, and the endpoints are part of the network, so the network infrastructure, and they use the applications on them, which is basically provided by the organization, and the data which they generate for the business done by the identities people, right? Now these are the 5 assets, these are the 5. So when you combine together, you get the matrix, right? 2-dimensional matrix. Now what I have done here, and usually ask our enterprise customers to do, is let me fill endpoint relevant modules or protection mechanisms relevant phrases, right? You would wonder that on the first row I have filled the relevant modules, right? At the same time, I have filled other stuff because the endpoint also deals with applications, the endpoints also deals with data, things like that, high level. Now I would, being an endpoint security and management guy, I will just stop there and ask my customers to go ahead and do this for your network, for your applications, data and identity. So when you're able to plot this, you are going to get a C-level view of what's happening in your organization in terms of protections, what you have. Or in the other way, what you can say is you are looking at your organization from the threat actor's point of view, which means you will find where are the gaps. And when you see the gaps, you should be able to actually fill them with the right security controls. So these the suggestions like a NIST framework and asset matching, similarly the Johari window, these are the layered approach. These are the suggestions in terms of strategy that we encourage our customers to start adapting and put in practice, so that proactively, as you mentioned, proactively they should be able to do a lot of measures and layer it so that not everything is at a single point of failure, it's distributed, right? So I think it's time for Kartika to fire a poll.
Yes. So yeah, you guys would be able to see the second poll on your screen. So this one is with respect to AI. So what is your primary expectation from AI when it comes to endpoint security? Please do go ahead and put down your answers. This will be a nice segue into what we're going to discuss next. A lot of you have already polled, which is very nice. We have a very interactive audience this evening. All right. About 50% of them have already voted. It's great. Fluctuating, very fluctuating. I will reveal the answers in some time. Right. We'll be closing the poll now because most of you have already voted. Yeah, the results are here. So it's a kind of very close tie between them wanting AI for faster threat detection and response and intelligent automation of routine security tasks. What is your take on this, Eddie?
I think this is the right, and I hate to put it in that term, but this is really the right approach to it. Because a lot of times, if you just ask a general person, you know, the AI and endpoint security, they look at that third answer, right? What we got is the lowest of reduce the manual workload for security teams. But that's not the right approach, because the problem with AI right now is there are still too many hallucinations and phantoms that come up in AI. So it's not really about reducing that manual load for the teams, right? They still have to analyze this information, but the improvement in the accuracy, right, and that intelligent automation, those are really where AI can benefit those skilled analysts, because if they can take all of that data that comes in for an incident, so many different endpoints, because we're feeding in with XDR now, all these different endpoints, and then do a faster correlation through the LLMs than what the analysts themselves can do. when they're presented with that full kill chain to see exactly everything in that attack, instead of piecing it together themselves, they can now look at it and go, yep, that makes sense. This is great for me. Now I know how to push a resolution and a recovery method, right? So I think this is the best way to think about this. And I know a lot of the vendors are heading in this path, but I'm glad to see that we didn't have the manual workload side higher, because that's not, you're not going to replace the people out of this. It's cutting time and getting better information out of it.
Great views.
Yeah, and that's the things to think about in AI, right? If we go deeper in this, is AI is in use right now, and we're talking more of predictive AI, right? These engines have been in place for a long time, and we used to call it machine learning. And it has truly grown. It has gotten to that being more adaptive. But I think what we're also starting to see, and I've talked to some folks out there of new ideas, and we look at behavior now, right? So it's part of most of the endpoint solutions that we look at is looking at behavior, but it's behavior of the application. The application is behaving in a certain way, and it's anomalous to normal operations. Well, what if we start incorporating the end user and how they work? Romanos and I can be put on the exact same laptop day to day, right? We pass it back and forth between us, and we could be told we're writing the same sort of reports and doing the same sort of work, but our styles are going to be completely different. And an advanced AI engine should be able to understand that I'm switching between different work styles here and be able to detect that and use that to determine risk. One of the things that I think people don't think about with endpoint security is the end user. We talked about more security awareness for the end user and better training, but if inside of the products, we can use generative AI to understand how they're working and whether how they're working is safer or more, what should we say, promiscuous. If the AI engine locally can detect that and say, hey, excuse me, user, can you change how you're viewing these sites and doing this because these actions are questionable and they increase risk. So guide the user to do better. And the same thing can happen when the user wants to go do something like ChatGPT. Instead of giving them the big red X and saying, no, you can't do this, guide the user into don't share private information. Don't share customer information. And now you'll have effective controls behind it, but guide the user to do what's right. And then, like I said, the co-pilots that pop up in all these solutions, they can really help analysts as well as the end users. But I say use the zero trust principle of don't automatically believe it. A seasoned analyst is going to see a recommendation and be able to go, yeah, that's good or bad. One of the early ones I saw, and I talked to one of the other analysts about, and she related to me, it was great. It did an analysis of an incident and said, here is the best solution to keep this incident from happening again. And the resolution was block Excel. Now, it sounds great, right? Because Excel has a lot of problems inside of it. But productivity would go way down in finance and HR and such when you blocked Excel. So co-pilots are great, but verify their information. Don't automatically trust it.
All right. So thanks for that views in terms of AI. So from our end, so what my thoughts in terms of AI is, see, there is a lot of AI and ML stuff happening in the detect and respond, right? As you mentioned rightly in the beginning, MTTT to MTTR, in between is everything, right? So how soon you are able to come back with the true positive alerts, how soon you are going to come back with a solution and stop it and recover it, all those things, right? Now, so I actually wanted to have the same stuff moved to the other layers. Say, for example, if you're trying to patch, right? Now, instead of just patching based on the severity of the patch, of course, that's required. And we also calculate scores in terms of risk today. Now, beyond that, now, what are the endpoints which are actually riskier in terms of being exposed to the internet? You and I belong to an organization where you mostly stay inside the organization, the protected environment, where I move out always, connecting to a lot of Wi-Fi networks, right? Not frequently connecting with the enterprise management server for the security. Now, when it comes to patching, mine has to be in the first ring and ensure that I am forced to have all critical security patches first. Now, this is where I think where we have to bring in more AI into the other layers. And similarly, when you have enforce MFA, when you enforce complex password, you cannot enforce the patch in the same way. When he comes start working, you can deploy a patch and ask for a reboot, or it would take some 15 minutes to deploy a dump 30 GB of patch. No, that's not going to work. So you have to have flexibility, have some intelligence, and ensure that you do it in the off office hours when the machine is down. Now, those kind of flexibility, having more intelligence in terms of AI would enable the other layers apart from the last layer, detect and respond, whether other layers would have better beneficial in terms of encouraging the custom endpoint users to embrace security, right? And we travel in that direction. So we want to ensure that AI ops and we are coexisting. That's something that we also ensure our customers. If they have, we saw the Johari window where we talked about different layers, right? Now, if the customer wants to have one layer and he already has one layer of solution tooling from some other vendor, we ensure that we are able to coexist and ensure their existing investment is already leveraged, and we complete the cycle, ensuring that he gets maximum out of his new investment and what he has already done. So that's something we want to do, and we ensure the products are available in the public cloud, on-prem, our cloud, MSP, all those things, right? So that's quickly about us. I appreciate all your information, data collected, and survey information. They are really actually very thoughtful. Now I have a few questions before we jump into the customer questions, where Kartika would be collecting, and based on the time we would be taking a few questions. But I have a few questions in mind. We understand the recent incident, global Windows outage, right? So to me, it's almost comparable to the WannaCry, which we discussed in the beginning of the webinar. Now, WannaCry was much discussed, and there were a lot of problems related to that. People have to work on that. But in terms of this recent incident, I understand my view on that is you have to. This is separate. It's not wholly on the security, but something to do with the operations team also. With your BCP, I want your opinion. What do you want to convey to our viewers comparing these events, and what do they take home and practice in terms of protecting their network and the endpoints?
Yeah, you kind of hit it when you said this wasn't security. This was an IT operations problem, right? There were businesses who had little to no impact, and I say that because, and it was in the little side, in that the issue went out, and we have a lot of blogs and reports on this on Forrester's site, but the issue started, and IT and security ops probably both looked at their dashboards. They cursed a lot because massive incident. And then those that didn't get affected, they turned over to their business recovery options and said, I have what appears to be a boot to failure, because that's what this was. The boot came up and then it failed. How do I recover boot to failure problems? Flipped open to the proper page that said my recovery is XYZ, and they did that. So if we look at that in comparison to WannaCry, right, the same things can be talked about of what was your recovery plan? So if you think about that with WannaCry, yes, it was a vulnerability that was exposed. But the businesses that got back to work quickly with almost no downtime were the ones who had a proper resiliency plan. So they managed their environment for all those failures that could potentially come up. The same was true here, is if you planned for failures that shouldn't happen, right? You shouldn't get ransomware. But if you do, here's this. Well, you don't expect a boot to failure after an update. Well, when you get it, here's your recovery plan. So that's why this merging and this integration between IT operations and security operations is so important, because they really have to understand what's going on in each of these operational units to better manage and protect the environment.
Well, thanks for your views on that.
Yeah, I think we only have time for one more question. So we have something from our audience here, Naveen. He asks, what kind of security strategies should we be looking at while we implement Copilot or AI in the organizations? So that's what Naveen wants to know.
Great question. Yeah. I think that the biggest thing that you should look at is where your data is going, right? And what data is being utilized. It's one thing where a Copilot or an AI application is just using whatever data you type into it. Okay, you can put some written policies around your end users to try and control that, and there are other tools that can be added into desktops and browsers to kind of control what data is in there or is being entered in. But understand from this application company or operations company, right, if we're talking security vendors, where they're scavenging their data, and then where is it being stored? Is it being combined with other data? Is it anonymized? That's really the key part of it. I think these tools are great, and the same thing with the applications, but you have to look at that data stream. And the real one to look at, I think, that a lot of people don't think of as we go back to the beginning, is mobile. If you're not understanding where the mobile applications are sending your data, then I think you have a massive security gap, and especially when it comes to AI, because that's not going to be combined with other companies, and who knows what they're going to do with it.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Naveen. I think with that, we come to the end of today's webinar. We're running short of time. Yes, know, right? It was very engaging. We didn't even know. Yes. So thank you so much, Paddy and Romanus, for being here and for walking us through endpoint security. We had a lot of actionable takeaways that we all can use. Thanks a lot for today's session. I also want to extend my gratitude to everyone who attended today. Great audience. You guys were very interactive. It kind of elevated the whole experience by a lot. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue this conversation, do reach out to us. You can also mail us at this particular email ID. Also, if you want to meet our experts face-to-face, we have a lot of events that's happening across the globe. We've shared a link of the events page with you all, so you guys can take a look at that and sign up for the events that are happening in your area. So once again, thanks a lot. Hoping to meet all of you again. Have a great day.